Hey folks, welcome to the channel. In today's build, I'm going to be doing a Damascus pattern I'm calling the Starry Cosmos. This is going to be 450 layers of Damascus, then I'm going to drill holes through and insert a mosaic pattern inside it, called a plug weld. Stay tuned, this one's going to be cool. I'll start here by forging the mosaic for the plugs. Here we're going to start with a stack that looks like this. Now it's time to forge weld all the layers together so we have one big block of solid steel. Now that we've got it forge welded together, we're going to start reducing this from our original stack into more of a square. Now we're going to start to manipulate the billet. We're going to turn it 45 degrees and start pressing in the corners. It's going to look something like this when we're done. Now we're going to take the billet and put it in this orientation, and we're going to squish it back down into a bar. And that's going to give us what we call C's. Now I'm pressing this with kiss blocks just to get a constant thickness down the billet to get ready for a restack. So here's the end cut off and etched. You can kind of see what the pattern looks like after the first stage. Now I've cut up that bar into 4, restacked it, and it's going back in the forge. Just like before, we're going to forge weld this together, and after a few heats, we're going to form it into a square. Now that we've got this forged into a square, once again we're going to knock in the corners, but this time we're going to fully re-square the billet. This is going to give us a pattern like this. Once again, I'm going to go to the kiss blocks to get this a nice constant thickness and perfectly square with nice sharp corners. So here's the last one, and then after combined and re-squared, we're at this. This is the final forge welding session for this mosaic. After forging the 4-way together, we're going to slowly turn this into a cylinder. Right now our billet looks like this. We need to start knocking in the corners and making it basically a cylinder. We need to make this thing something that's relatively round because later on we're going to be turning this on the lathe. After taking some measurements, I realized I'm still too thick, so I'm going to draw this out. I need to be relatively close on the dimensions because if I take a lot off on the lathe, I'll start to dig into the pattern and that won't be so good. I want to have some different size stars in the final pattern, so I'm actually putting some steps into the cylinder so I'll have different size stars. It turns out to be a happy accident, but the way I'm forging the last step, it's actually twisting the billet, but it looks really cool in the final pattern. I've got the mosaic cylinder forged. Now I'm going to turn my attention to the Cosmos, which is just going to be a 450 layer random Damascus. So here I'm starting with 36 layers. We're going to forge weld those together, restack them a few times, and that'll give our layer count. I've drawn out and restacked those 36 layers. Now we're going to forge weld all that together. And then we'll be doing another restack to get to our final layer count. And now the final restack for the Cosmos portion of our pattern. This should give us 432 layers. I'll be drawing this out and actually starting to put it in knife form. Before that, I'm actually going to cut the billet in two because I'm going to be making two knives. Now I'm starting to isolate the steel I'm going to be using for the integral bolster. It's always good to oversize this piece so you have much more than you think you need. I'm also going to be pulling the tang off the end of this, so I definitely need a lot of steel here. Now I'm just doing some rough forging just to kind of get this in knife shape so I know where I'm going to be drilling my holes. Now it's time to turn the mosaic star on the lathe. I need these perfectly round because I'm going to be drilling holes into the knives and these need to fit nice and snug. After this, I'll be slicing these with the bandsaw to make little plugs. So here's the knife after forging. It's still pretty thick, and that's because we're going to put the plugs in. But luckily I had enough steel to make two of these, because I certainly have enough steel. After turning this down on the lathe, I have enough steel to make quite a few plugs. So I turned this down on the lathe. Had one little oops here, but that's fine. I'm going to end up slicing these up. So I just put some kind of targets of what I want in the different sizes. But what I'm going to do is cut these up first to see how many I have before I actually go drill my holes. So here they are with finally the holes drilled. It took me a while to do this. I ended up using annular cutters, which I had to order, but to get the holes, so I did those on the mill. So these are all just sitting here right now. Now we're going to go over and TIG weld all these in to get ready for the last forging session. I was a little apprehensive about this part, but it actually went really easy. The plugs just spread out and they forge weld into the holes really, really well. Now I'm spending a couple of heats at the anvil, just concentrating on the heel and drawing that down and back towards the integral bolster. The final part of the forging is drawing out the tang. I'll be pulling the steel out of the integral bolster, so that's why we wanted a lot of steel there. So here's the knives after forging. Turned out really well. It looks like they're forge welded pretty good. I'll find out once I start grinding into them. but I didn't want to forge any of these to shape because I didn't want to distort the circles at all. And then for some of them, especially this one, I'm going to end up cutting into a couple of the circles just to do the profile, which I think actually will look pretty cool on its own. So I'm going to put the profile into a couple of these, and we'll see how we're going to make them look. So here they are after a bit of grinding. I wanted to make sure the forge welds all took, and they turned out really well. I did a test etch on them. I'll get a little closer here. You can certainly see the stars. And the cool part, a bit unexpected, is as I did the smaller ones, they kind of twisted. So you see this cool kind of spinning circular pattern, which I really love. So I'm really happy with these so far. I'm going to do a bunch more grinding, get the bolsters a little closer. Then I'm actually going to heat treat before I do any bevels because I don't want these guys to warp. I really love the Broadback integral bolster grinding attachment for exactly this kind of thing. I noticed the tang on one of these was a little off, so firing up the oxyacetylene torch and doing a little handwork here. So I've applied some layout fluid, and I'm just taking the knives to my granite surface plate so I can square up the bolster. That'll give me some lines to grind to. So I've done a bunch more grinding on these. I got them a lot closer to the dimensions that I want. I still haven't ground the bevels in. Again, I'm going to do that after heat treat, but wanted to get this close. I've done a bunch of work on the bolsters, trim them up a little bit. Now I'm going to go to the mill, and I'm going to just mill this all nice and even. One of the bonuses of having a mill. The way I'm doing that is I've got them locked up into a file guide. I will lock this into the mill with a stop so that I can turn it and it'll be exactly where I need it. I'll be using a ball end mill for this. The reason being is once we dig this out with a ball end mill, we'll have a nice radius here. We don't want to have any sharp edges. First, I'm using a square end mill to take out most of the material, and then I'll come back with the ball end mill to do that fillet on the inside. Here we go with the heat treat on these knives. Both went pretty flawlessly. So here's the smaller of the two knives. I've done a little bit of grinding on it just to take the scale off and hopefully get through the decarb. So we're going to test it on the HRC tester. Let's give it a shot. Okay, so that says 58. I think there's still probably a little bit of decarb, so let's try a couple of more. 59. I think we're probably going to get it even higher, but okay, I've done a bunch more grinding on this just to make sure it's decarb. Yeah, so there it is at 60. So one of the keys to making sure you get through all the decarb while you're grinding, you shouldn't really see any of the Damascus patterns. So if you look here, I can kind of see the Damascus. This is how I know I haven't gotten through the decarb. When you get down here, you can see closer to the edge, I don't see the pattern. So this is where I know I've gotten through the decarb. Okay, same on this side, because I haven't done much grinding up here, you can kind of see the pattern. But down here where I tested, you don't. So I'm pretty sure it's between 59.5 and 60. So let's talk about what decarb actually is. That's decarburization. So when this knife gets exposed to high heats, it'll actually burn the carbon out of the knife from the outside kind of in. So we want to make sure we get through all that, because that's just low carbon. It's going to be softer steel on the outside. So I'm finally done what I consider the final grinding on these. Tons of sanding to do, of course, but the edge is down to about 7/1000ths of an inch here, so it's really thin, and the spine is very thin. It almost disappears when it goes sideways for both of these. So really, really thin. I was going to do the S-grind on these, but I just feel like the spine is so thin on these, I'm just not going to have the room. So I'm going to forego the S-grind this time. I did do an ever so slight convex on the bottom, kind of 1/2 inch on these, getting closer to the edge, so that should hopefully give it a little bit of food relief as it peels off the edge. So here are the knives so far. I've sanded them to 220 with the new sanding machine, which went great. I haven't done much of the sanding on the bolsters because they will still get ground when the handle goes on. So now let's move our attention over to handles. So for this, yeah, that's a big piece of koa. I actually won this at Blade Show from the High Koa folks in a drawing, Blade Show 2 years ago. So time to cut into this baby. So I'm going to cut a big block off of this, cut it in 4, and use 2 pieces of the same piece of koa. And if you're not aware, koa comes from Hawaii. You're not allowed to even cut down live koa trees. You're only allowed to take deadfall. So expensive piece of wood here. So I went ahead and just drilled the holes into the blocks to match the tang, so they go in nicely. Now I just need to take a Dremel or something and just hollow out the insides to account for this little curve here. Now that I got these all glued up, what we're going to do is, the very first thing is square up the blocks, because you know the hole will be a little bit off and not perfect to the blade. So we're just going to put it on a 1, 2, 3 block, and then measure the lowest point on all the corners on both sides, lock this, and then draw a line here. And because we're doing it against the blade, okay, then we're going to have a line that we can grind to square it up. Now that I've got the handles all squared up, I've drawn my handle profile on the back. Now we're just going to cut this basic profile out, and then we'll grind it a little bit to shape, and then we'll probably go back and work on the bolster. So I did a bunch of grinding on these handles. I decided to go with a faceted handle on the bottom. It just feels really nice, and I think it looks cool. You're really pinch gripping it here anyway, so it's not like these are going to give you hot spots. And they'll be smoothed out a little bit with some sandpaper. And here's the other one. So now it's time to sand this area, get this all sanded, and then get prepped for the etching. I know you're asking yourself, but he hasn't etched it and now the handle's on it. Stay tuned and you'll see what I'm going to do to protect the wood and be able to etch the blade. Okay, so I got these all ground to 800 grit on the blades and the bolsters, and now you see I've taped them off to the front of the wood here. So what I'm going to do, because I need to etch the blades, I've taped these off so I can apply some clear nail polish. So I'm going to nail polish probably a couple of inches up the handles so that I can immerse these in acid. It won't affect the handles and it'll etch everything else. Okay, so I've rinsed these with soapy water and they're ready to go into the ferric.